The last part of section 1, and the reason why I wanted to break up section 1 into different videos because there's so much information, is patterns of circulation. So I've mentioned in a previous video that we have two primary subsystems for circulation. We have pulmonary circulation, which goes between the heart and the lungs, specifically the right side of the heart and the lungs, and then back to the left side of the heart. So from the body to the right side, to the lungs, to the left side, to the body, to the right side, to the lungs, to the left side. And the other kind of circulation is systemic circulation. That's between the heart and the body. These are two completely separate loops of circulation, and they don't mix. Another thing I wanted to mention, just to try to get you to visualize how blood is actually pumped. I don't want you to think that the heart pumps once and all of the blood that's pumped out of the heart completely circulates through the whole body and back. It's more like it's a complete system of fluids that's contained within like these little vessels. And as the blood pumps, it just kind of pushes the fluid around. And so then like the fluid that ends up going towards the extremities, like your hands and your feet, are pushed by the blood that's all behind them. I don't know if I can really describe it very well, but it's just like a whole system of pipes that's filled with fluid. And at one end of that system of pipes, you have something that's pumping. So it just it continuously pushes the whole system in circulation, if that makes sense. So I don't want you to think about it as just like blood gets pumped out of your heart, goes through your whole body and back to your heart all at once in like in one pump. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, so let's look at pulmonary circulation specifically. This should kind of review specifically what I talked about in the first video of how blood is pumped through the heart. Deoxygenated blood from the body enters the right atrium through the inferior and superior vena cava. It goes into the right atrium and then is pumped through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, blood is sent through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. The pulmonary artery is the only artery to carry deoxygenated blood. Remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart, but this particular artery is leaving the right side of the heart, which contains deoxygenated blood, which means it's the only artery that carries deoxygenated blood. This is going to branch into two smaller arteries, one going to each lung. In the lungs, CO2 is going to diffuse out of the capillaries and oxygen diffuses in. I'll address how that works in section 3, or the last, I don't know if it has 3 sections, in the last section. Oxygenated blood flows into the venules, which merge into the pulmonary veins that lead to the left atrium. Again, the pulmonary vein is the only vein in the body to carry oxygenated blood. From the left atrium, it passes through the mitral valve to the left ventricle and through the aortic valve to the aorta to the rest of the body. Now, systemic circulation, like I said, occurs between the heart and all of the other parts of the body. First, it gets pumped to the aorta and then to different subsystems within systemic circulation. So I want to talk about the subsets of systemic circulation in this video. The first one, which is probably the most important one, is called coronary circulation. Coronary means heart. So this is how blood supplies This is how the heart supplies blood to itself. The heart muscle is very thick, obviously, because it is the only muscle that works from like before you're born until the day that you die. So oxygen and nutrients must be supplied to each cell at all times. If there's any blockage in the coronary arteries, the cells can die. So a couple of diseases that can occur, one is atherosclerosis. This is caused by fat deposits. If you eat a lot of fatty foods, specifically saturated fats like animal fats, you can get fat deposits on the walls of these arteries, which makes it harder for the blood to get through the artery. You just think about like a clogged pipe like that. And atherosclerosis can lead to a heart attack, which is when if blood supply is interrupted to the coronary arteries, then like I said, the cell muscles start to die. And because you remember from the control of the heartbeat video when I talked about the SA and the AV node and how the heart muscles contract in waves, if you think about a football game, when you have like one section that doesn't want to participate in a wave and you get like everybody's doing the wave and you get there and it's like, blah, That's exactly what happens in a heart attack. And that bleh, for the heart cells basically causes what's called an arrhythmia. And that's when other cells start to contract erratically because the wave was interrupted. If the blockage occurs in the brain, then you have something called a stroke. Now, depending on which side of the brain the blockage is, will determine the severity of the effects and how much blockage there was, where the blockage occurs, and how long the oxygen, or how long the brain was deprived of oxygen after that blockage. So, for example, the right hemisphere of your brain controls the left side of your body and vice versa. So, if you have a stroke on the right side of your head and it's a severe stroke, you might actually lose a lot of function on the left side of your body. So, the face might droop like that. If you see people that have like, they talk like that, probably they've had a stroke.
Yeah, we're going to zoom in on a coronary artery, and in the cutaway, you're going to see LDL cholesterol in yellow, these little yellow droplets that under hypertension, hyperlipidemia are going to create here the beginnings of a fatty streak, which most
This
of
is
us have.
atherosclerosis that you're
You'll get
looking
a
at.
fibrous cap to protect it for a while.
That's the fat.
But the fatty streak will continue to grow, as you see here, under continuing obesity metabolic syndrome. With inflammation, it can begin to rupture, producing a blood clot, disrupting blood flow, creating a heart attack, stroke, and sudden death. And that is what's actually happening.
Okay, don't know why that doesn't work when I'm in full screen mode, but whatever. Okay, now to talk about specific subsets of systemic circulation. There's a few parts that are essential in blood filtration, and probably the most important is renal. Renal means kidneys. So you see down here, here's kidneys. That's what renal means. So the function of the kidneys is literally to filter metabolic waste out of the blood, and so about a quarter of your blood is that comes into your aorta is going to the renal circulation, and that's purely because the function of the kidneys is to filter the blood. Another subset of systemic circulation is hepatic portal. Hepatic means liver. And the reason for that is because any excess nutrients that are in the blood go to the liver to get stored for future use. And the last part of this section is the lymphatic system. This is included in the circulatory system, although it's a completely different set of vessels. The biggest function is to return fluids that have built up in tissues back to the bloodstream. If you've ever been on a very long flight and you don't stand up and walk around a lot, you might notice that maybe your feet and your ankles become swollen. This is because of the pressure in the cabin and the long time sitting. It ends up resulting in some lymph fluid accumulating in your feet. So that's why people recommend you get up every hour or so and just kind of have a bit of a walk around up and down the aisle. When you walk, you use your skeletal muscles, and of course that contracts and squeezes some of the blood back, and then the lymph can be returned. The lymph vessels also merge to form larger vessels. They are similar in structure to capillary and veins, but there is no circulation. There is no pumping mechanism for lymph. It's purely based on your skeletal muscles to basically when they contract, they kind of push it back to the blood. And it's only one way, like from body tissues back to the bloodstream. So you're basically filtering everything, all the excess fluid, all the excess lymph back to the circulatory system. Lymph itself is a transparent yellowish liquid. When it's being returned to the blood, it passes through lymph nodes, and lymph nodes are going to filter the lymph as it passes. They store large amounts of lymphocytes, which are white blood cells. So you're basically filtering out that fluid that's been kind of hanging out in your tissues for any pathogens that might be in the blood before it goes back to the circulatory system. So if you ever get an infection like a cold or a flu, especially because you have a high concentration of lymph nodes here just below your jawline, you might notice that these sides of your neck become sore, because when you have an infection, you've got a high concentration of lymph nodes here. You also have them in your armpits and in your groin area. which is here. And so when you have an infection, your lymph nodes are going to double the production of white blood cells, which is what makes them swollen.